My name is Cormac. I am 68 years old, and I have spent my life building bridges and restoring old structures. Tonight I stood in the ballroom of a country club in Westport, Connecticut, while my daughter Rhea held the microphone. She smiled at the crowd, then turned to me with the kind of grin that cuts deeper than any insult. "You are irrelevant," she said. "No one here cares what a retired old man says." The room erupted in laughter. Glasses clinked, champagne foamed and spilled onto the white tablecloths. In front of me lay a folder with the invoice for the flowers, exactly $17,800. My name was still printed at the bottom, the escrow account listed as guarantor. I kept my face still, my hand closed over the folder thumb, pressing against the edge as if it were a lifeline. I did not shout. I did not defend myself. I watched my daughter glow in the spotlight while my silence was mistaken for weakness. The band struck up a tune, guests swayed, servers carried silver trays of scallops wrapped in bacon. Nobody looked at me. For a moment, I could have been a ghost haunting my own family's celebration. It was not the first time I had been made invisible. Years ago, at the funeral of my wife, Rhea barely spoke to me. Now here I was again, erased in front of friends, neighbors, and the very people who once shook my hand with respect. But I was not powerless. Not here. Not tonight. On the table beside me sat a small envelope, cream-colored, sealed with wax. Inside was a notarized codicil that changed the direction of every inheritance my daughter thought was hers. The notary was already waiting in the hallway. The escrow agent, too. I had placed a hold on every pending payment for this wedding. The vendors had been warned to expect a freeze. I glanced at the screen of my phone. A group chat screenshot had been forwarded to me that morning, Rhea and her bridesmaids mocking me, calling me the relic who pays the bills. Their laughter was casual, cruel, and careless enough to leak onto Nextdoor, the neighborhood forum where everyone comments on noise complaints and yard sales. The post had already gained traction. Neighbors were watching. But I said nothing. I let them dance. I let them drink. I let them believe. $3 slid into the valet's pocket earlier when I arrived. He looked at me like any other old man trying to appear generous. That was fine. I did not need him to know that I had already spoken to the Homeowners Association about the fines they were about to issue for music blasting past curfew. The HOA had been waiting for this night, and I had delivered it to them. Silent power works best when no one expects it. I thought of the county clerk's office, where only yesterday a clerk pulled up the land records and confirmed in writing that the property Rhea boasted about as her house still sat firmly under my name. $2.7 million of coastal landmine. The record was stamped, signed, and ready to be displayed. But not yet. Timing matters. For now, I stood at the edge of the ballroom holding the envelope, watching the swirl of dresses and tuxedos. My daughter's voice echoed proud and careless. "This night is about us, not about him." She pointed to me. Guests chuckled. I did not flinch. I let the insult float above the chandeliers, let it hang in the air like smoke. Because what they did not know was that the first domino had already tipped. The escrow hold had gone into effect the moment she called me irrelevant. The florist, the caterer, the band, every one of them would receive a notice within the hour that the payments were frozen. I would tell you the rest in a moment, but first let me ask you, tell me where you are watching from and hit subscribe. Families and money. We need to talk. I left the ballroom and stepped into the corridor where the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and overworked air conditioning. The noise from the wedding dimmed behind me, muffled like a radio turned down. My shoes clicked on the polished floor. The rhythm steadied me. At the valet stand earlier, I had tipped $3. Nothing more. I watched the young man's face fall slightly. Perhaps he thought I was cheap. Perhaps he told his coworkers later that the father of the bride barely tipped. Let him think it. Sometimes being underestimated is useful. It leaves room for surprise. The truth was, I had already paid $17,800 for the flowers alone. A ridiculous sum for roses and hydrangeas that would wilt by morning. When I signed that invoice, I placed the payment through escrow, not directly. I told the event coordinator it was just procedure. She smiled and nodded, not realizing that the account could be frozen with one phone call. Tonight, I had already made that call. Outside, the parking lot glowed under harsh lamps. A sign posted near the entrance reminded guests of the Homeowners Association's quiet hours. Violations could lead to fines. I had received a copy of the bylaw just last week, complete with a notice of pending enforcement. I slipped the document into my pocket before heading to the wedding. Timing again would matter. My phone buzzed. Another screenshot arrived, forwarded from a neighbor. It was a piece of the bridesmaids' group chat. They had mocked the suit I planned to wear, calling it Grandpa's funeral outfit. They laughed about how I carried a leather folder everywhere saying I looked like a man lost in another century. That chat leaked onto next door where comments piled up. Neighbors speculated about whether I was truly bankrolling the entire wedding, or if the groom's family had contributed anything at all. Humiliation has a way of echoing longer when it goes public. Private insults sting, public ones scar. I read the thread slowly, then tucked the phone away. I returned to the ballroom. The music was louder now. The band had moved to a jazz set. Guests were flushed, sweat shining on their foreheads. No one noticed me slip back to my table. My envelope still sat there untouched. The wax seal caught the light from the chandeliers. I poured myself a glass of water. Not champagne, not wine, just water. The ice clinked against the glass. Small choices remind me of control. Even refusal becomes a form of presence. Across the room, my daughter Rhea was laughing with her new husband Tobin. He leaned close to her ear, smug, as though the world had already been handed to them. She glanced in my direction, only once, her eyes sharp, dismissive. It was the same look she gave when she was 15 and refused to mow the lawn because, in her words, that is work for people without futures. My thoughts were interrupted by a vibration in my pocket, a banking alert. This one flagged a wire transfer $27,000, leaving a joint family account I had once set up to support household emergencies. The transfer went straight to Tobin's personal credit card. No hesitation, no courtesy call. Just theft wrapped in entitlement. I leaned back in my chair. Around me, the wedding spun forward with toasts, cheers, laughter. I stayed silent, sipping water, letting the cold burn against the roof of my mouth. Because what they did not know was simple. My power had never been in the microphone nor in the spotlight. It had always been in the documents, the records, the signatures that spoke long after words faded. I will tell you what happened next, but only after you think about this. When humiliation comes from your own blood, what would you do? I slipped away from the crowd again, this time toward the dressing rooms, set aside for the bridal party. The laughter and music dulled as I pushed open the door. Inside, mirrors lined the walls and the air smelled of perfume mixed with hairspray. My daughter Rhea stood with her new husband Tobin, their heads close together over a phone. They did not notice me at first. I heard her whisper, sharp and impatient. He has no idea. By next month we will get the house transferred. The quitclaim deed is just a formality. Tobin grinned, tapping at the screen. Your father signed things before without reading. He is old. He will do it again. I stepped further into the room and the wood floor creaked beneath my shoe. They turned startled, then quickly masked their faces with smiles too smooth to be real. Dad, Rhea said, voice sweet as syrup. We were just talking about the future. You know, family plans. I nodded, though the words were already burned into me. Quitclaim deed. My home, the coastal property worth $2.7 million, reduced in their whispers to paperwork they believed I would sign blindly. Tobin's phone buzzed. He glanced down, not quick enough to hide the notification from my eyes. It was the banking alert, the very same one I had received. A wire transfer of $27,000 completed. My money slid into his account, as if it were nothing more than spare change. Everything's fine, Tobin muttered, slipping the phone back into his pocket. His face tightened for a moment, then smoothed. I studied them both. Rhea in her wedding dress, layers of silk flowing to the floor, pearls glinting at her ears. She looked radiant, admired by everyone outside that door. Yet here, stripped of ceremony, she was the same girl who once mocked her mother's frugal grocery choices, the same girl who refused to pay her own credit card bills, because that's what parents are for. Tobin, tall and restless, kept glancing at the clock on the wall as though business could not wait, not even on his wedding night. His suit was tailored, his smile polished, but his eyes flickered with greed. Dad, you should be enjoying yourself, Rhea said. This is a happy day. Happy. I almost laughed. Happiness should not come at the cost of betrayal. I thought of the codicil in my folder, the notary waiting. They believed I carried old papers, irrelevant documents, maybe even bills. They had no idea what power rested under that wax seal. Outside, the band shifted into another song. Applause followed, muffled through the walls. For a moment, I stood in that room and saw my life in sharp clarity. Decades of work, the home I had built, the savings I had guarded. And now my own child plotting to strip it away with signatures and whispers. Everything will be yours, Tobin said softly to Rhea, thinking I could not hear. No, I thought. Not anymore. I turned hand on the doorknob and looked back once. Enjoy the evening, I told them, my voice calm. It will be memorable. Their smiles faltered just slightly. They did not know why. But what they did not know was that the county clerk had already pulled the land record yesterday, stamped and sealed under my name alone. No quitclaim deed, no whispered plan could erase that. The paper was already in my folder. The toast was underway when I returned to the ballroom. Guests lifted glasses of champagne. The band paused, waiting for the next cue. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone, his voice bright and polished. And now he said, "Let us hear from the father of the bride." All eyes turned to me. I rose slowly, buttoning my jacket, the folder still in my hand. The room hushed, eager, expectant. Rhea smiled at me, but her eyes were sharp, warning me to keep it brief. I walked to the center of the floor. The microphone felt cold in my hand. I did not thank the guests. I did not flatter the couple. I simply spoke. "This has been a beautiful evening," I said. "But some payments, like love, are not guaranteed." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People glanced at one another, unsure whether to laugh. I opened the folder, held up a document, and read a single line, the escrow account number tied to the event. As of an hour ago, I continued, all vendor payments for tonight's wedding have been frozen. The florist, the caterer, the band each has been notified. The band leader stiffened, lowering his trumpet. A waiter set down his tray mid-step. The coordinator hurried to her phone, tapping frantically. Gasps broke out, whispers rising like a tide. Rhea stepped forward, face flushed. "Dad, what are you doing? You cannot." I cut her off with a raised hand. The money was mine to release, and I chose not to. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then Tobin barked a laugh, loud, forced. "This is nonsense. He is bluffing." At that cue, the ballroom doors opened. A woman in a navy blazer entered, carrying a leather case. She walked with steady purpose, heels clicking against the marble. She stopped beside me and set the case on the table, opening it to reveal documents and a notary stamp. "This," I said, "is the notary who will witness a codicil tonight. My estate plan has changed." The guests shifted, shocked. Phones appeared, screens glowing as they recorded. This was no longer a wedding. It was a public reckoning. Rhea's voice cracked. "Dad, please not here." But I kept my tone level. "There is no better place. Tonight you declared me irrelevant. Tonight you mocked me. Tonight you reminded everyone that you believed my worth ended with my retirement. But what you forgot, what you never understood, is that power does not vanish with age. It rests where signatures meet paper." I let the silence stretch. The notary laid out the codicil on the table, the stamp ready beside it. The crowd leaned forward, hungry, horrified. Then I said the words that sealed the moment. "This wedding will be remembered not for your vows, but for the day you lost your claim." Phones buzzed again. Notifications spread like sparks. A neighbor had posted the scene to Nextdoor already. The thread grew with every second. I could almost hear the comments forming. "Did you see what happened at the Westport wedding? The father froze the payments live." The master of ceremonies stood frozen with his cue cards. The band shuffled uneasily, their sheet music untouched. The caterer whispered into her phone, likely already calculating losses. I closed the folder with a quiet snap. "Enjoy the evening," I said. "The bill will wait." And with that, I stepped aside, letting the crowd absorb what had just happened. But what they did not know was that this was only the first layer. The deeper cut had yet to come. The ballroom was thick with whispers. Some guests sat frozen in their chairs, others leaned into their phones, thumbs flying. I stood calmly by the notary's table. The codicil gleamed under the light, its edges crisp, the stamp poised. I spoke with no rush. "The trust that governs my estate has been revised. Rhea, you are no longer a beneficiary. The conditional power of attorney I drafted years ago has been triggered tonight. The condition was public humiliation. You met it in full view." Rhea gasped. Her bouquet trembled in her hands, petals dropping onto the carpet. Tobin's jaw tightened. He muttered something I did not bother to catch. I turned another page. "The coastal house you bragged about, valued at $2.7 million, remains in my sole name. County clerk records stamped yesterday confirm this. There will be no quitclaim deed. There will be no transfer." The notary stamped the codicil. The sound echoed small yet final, like a gavel in a courtroom. Gasps again, louder this time. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered against the marble, scattering shards. The band packed their instruments, muttering about unpaid hours. But I was not done. I unfolded another document, this one bound in blue. "The family LLC that owns the party boat you use each summer, its control has shifted. I hold 51%. Effective immediately, the vessel cannot be sold, leased, or docked without my consent." Tobin's face drained of color. That boat was his pride, his toy for impressing friends. Now, it was locked under my authority. And as for funds, I continued the wire transfer this afternoon. $27,000 taken from a shared account has been reported. Bank alerts do not vanish. That money will be frozen pending review. Theft leaves a trail. The room erupted. Guests whispered openly now. Some recorded, some laughed nervously, some simply stared. I raised my phone. On the screen played a clip from my Ring camera. It showed Tobin removing the nameplate of my late wife from the porch of the coastal house. Gasps turned to shouts. Rhea clutched Tobin's arm, but his face gave him away, guilty, ashamed, caught. "You took her name down," I said. "That alone speaks louder than any insult." The notary stamped the final page. Papers slid back into the folder, signed, sealed. I set the folder down. "This trust, this home, this company, none of it belongs to you now. You forfeited it with your contempt." Rhea's knees buckled. Tobin pulled her upright. Guests avoided their eyes. The master of ceremonies whispered into his microphone, unsure whether to continue. I looked across the room, calm. "Family should protect. Instead, you plotted, and tonight you lost." The silence that followed was complete. Even the clink of glasses ceased. But what they did not know was that the reckoning was not finished. There was still one more document in my folder waiting. The ballroom no longer looked like a celebration. The cake sat untouched, its tears, leaning slightly under the weight of the flowers. Guests gathered in uneasy clusters, murmuring, some slipping away toward the parking lot. The smell of spilled champagne lingered sharp and sour. Rhea sat in a chair near the dance floor, her veil pushed back, her face streaked with mascara. Tobin stood beside her, jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists. He muttered to anyone who would listen that this was all a mistake, that none of it would hold. But his eyes betrayed him. He knew. The coordinator approached me, phone in hand. "Sir, the vendors are calling. Payments have stopped." I nodded. "That is correct. They will be handled later through proper review." Her face paled. She retreated without another word. Then came the knock at the door. A man in a gray jacket entered, clipboard under his arm. He carried the authority of the Homeowners Association. In a steady voice, he announced, "The music exceeded curfew. A fine is being issued. Notice will be delivered now." He handed me the paper, though it was addressed to the event hosts Rhea and Tobin. I passed it directly to them. The crowd stirred again, whispers sharper this time. A wedding fined by its own HOA, embarrassment, layered upon embarrassment. Rhea tore at the notice, crumpling it in her hands. "Why are you doing this to us?" she cried. I met her eyes steady. "Actions bring consequences. You chose the stage. I merely revealed the curtain." More guests slipped out, murmuring apologies. Others stayed drawn to the spectacle. Phones continued to record. The story had already gone viral. I could see the glow of screens, hear the buzz of alerts spreading from one pocket to another. Tobin's phone chimed again. He glanced down, then cursed under his breath. I knew what he saw, the bank's second notification. The wire transfer flagged for review, the freeze confirmed. His shoulders sagged. Rhea buried her face in her hands. "Everything is ruined," she whispered. I did not answer. Silence can cut deeper than words. The band packed their last instrument. The caterer wheeled away trays of untouched food. Servers huddled near the exit, waiting for guidance that would not come. The room felt hollow, stripped of joy. But what they did not know was that the most decisive blow had not yet landed. One last paper remained in my folder, and it carried the weight of finality. When the last song faltered into silence, I stepped forward once more. The notary still stood at my side, calm, unshaken by the storm she had witnessed. I placed the folder on the table, opening it slowly so that every ear strained to catch the rustle of paper. "This," I said, sliding out the final document, "is from the county clerk's office. It confirms the record of ownership for the coastal house. My name alone remains on the title. There is no joint deed, no quitclaim transfer, no hidden clause." The notary held up the paper so the guests could see the official seal. The light caught it, a glint of authority that silenced even Tobin's muttering. I turned to Rhea. "You called me irrelevant. Tonight, you learn the truth. Relevance is not measured in microphones or applause. It is measured in whose name sits on the line that cannot be erased." Her face crumpled. The pearls at her ears seemed suddenly heavy, dragging her head down. Tobin tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "You cannot do this." "I already have," I replied. I reached into my pocket and held up a small black device, the smart key card for the coastal house. "This," I said, "no longer recognizes your codes. Access revoked." Gasps swept the room. Some guests shifted closer. Others stepped back as though the air itself had turned sharp. The notary closed her case with a decisive snap. "All documents executed and witnessed," she announced. I placed the smart card back into my pocket. The house will be sealed tomorrow. Locks recoded, access cleared. You will not step inside again. Rhea sobbed, clutching her dress as if it might anchor her. Tobin stood rigid, his pride collapsing in on itself. The master of ceremonies lowered his microphone, shaking his head. The wedding was over, not by the band's finale, but by a father's quiet decree. I lifted the folder, tucking it under my arm. I came here to celebrate. Instead, I leave here with clarity. Family is not defined by ceremony or smiles. It is proven in respect, and respect is gone. I walked toward the exit. No one stopped me. The valet hurried to fetch my car, his earlier disappointment forgotten, his eyes wide with something like awe. But what they did not know was that my journey would not end in Westport. My peace lay elsewhere, beyond the reach of their ambition. The night air outside the country club was cooler than I expected. I breathed it in slow and steady, letting the noise of the ballroom fade behind me. The valet pulled my car around the headlights, cutting across the dark lot. He opened the door, and I slid into the seat with the folder resting beside me like an old companion. I did not look back at the building. I had no need. Inside the celebration was fractured vendors, unpaid guests unsettled, and a daughter who had mistaken inheritance for entitlement. The papers were signed. The smart locks had already been reprogrammed. What was once uncertain was now fixed in ink and seal. Driving north, the road emptied quickly. Town lights gave way to long stretches of trees. I thought about the years I had built bridges, the calculations, the steel beams that rose because numbers were respected. Structures stand when rules are honored. They fall when corners are cut. Families are not so different. By dawn, I crossed into Vermont. I had rented a small cabin there, tucked against a line of pines. The place smelled of wood smoke and damp earth. Modest, yes, but mine for as long as I wished. The quiet was a gift money could not buy. I made coffee, black and simple, and watched the steam curl in the pale morning light. For the first time in years, I felt no weight pressing on my chest. The accounts were secured. The trust was updated. The codicil was sealed. The LLC stood under my control. Even the homeowners association fine had been delivered directly into their hands, one last reminder that rules apply to everyone. Rhea would learn in time that wealth is not a birthright. Tobin would discover that cleverness without integrity is a hollow game. They might rebuild or they might not. That was no longer my concern. I am 68 years old. I have fewer years ahead than behind. But those years are mine, and I intend to live them without apology. Some will call me ruthless. Some will call me wise. Let them. I closed the folder, placed it on the shelf by the cabin window, and whispered to myself, done. If you believe I made the right choice, comment right. If you have another way, share it.